I'm blue without your face, but what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need.
Without further ado, I have to bring you in, Mr. Roberts. Thank you for joining me this morning. I hope God is blessing you, and I hope you're doing well. Tell the world how you're feeling today.
Well, thank you very much, Rashid. I'm pleased to be on again with you.
Well, after the elections, we see Trump moving, um, and he's doing some things that he said he would do. But there's one thing, Mr. Roberts, that I can't get past, and that is Elon Musk and a few other people like Rubio and other people that are connected to the deep state. I know journalist and author and historian Matthew Ehret did a historical layout of how Elon Musk acquired his wealth and how he went through the intelligence services. So if this is the case, how can Elon be against the deep state if he's gotten his money from the deep state?
Well, Rashid, I'm not knowledgeable about whether or not Elon Musk got his money from the deep state. Um, and I don't know the person that you cited as the source. And what I do know is that the deep state itself sets out to ruin people that it thinks might act against them by identifying them as members of the deep state. And I don't know if that's what's being done to Elon Musk or not. But so far, we see he's very outspoken against the deep state and is acting against them. And so I say, let's be satisfied with that.
I
And
understand.
not worry how he can do it if he's a member of it. Uh, if he's actually a member of it, it'll make him more effective in exposing it. So I'm not going to worry about it until I see something that he's doing that's clearly in the interest of the deep state. And it seems to me he's acting in defense of Trump's assault on the United States government, which appears to be corrupt in every agency, every cabinet department, the Congress, both the House, the Senate, the judiciary. The whole thing is a rotten structure. And I think Trump is correct that it needs to be completely rebuilt. There's no integrity in the agencies. I mean, the FBI, devoid of integrity, the CIA, devoid of integrity, USAID, devoid of integrity. Wherever you look, you see the United States government using our tax money to operate against us. And so it has to be corrected. And I really think the FBI and the CIA are so corrupt, they just have to be closed down. And you just have to rebuild them anew without any of the current members. So that's the situation that exists. And let's just hope that Elon Musk stays after them.
Well, do you think that with his mandate, with Trump's mandate, because he first of all he won the first election. Let's be clear about that. But with this election here, do you think he has the power to close down the CIA and the FBI without ramifications, and also Um, do you think that the um, deep state will allow that to happen without hitting him every way they can with all of the levels of power that they have accumulated over the years?
Oh, I'm sure they'll do everything they can to protect themselves, including new attempts at assassination.
Hmm.
There's no doubt about that. Now, the question of what you're asking, I think, Rashid, is whether the executive has the power to take actions, or whether these actions are the prerogative of Congress or the courts. I think the answer is that the United States government is so totally corrupt, and the Congress is so dysfunctional, it can't do anything. And so, like we have seen in other forms of representative government, for example, the Roman Senate, they become so corrupt they can't act. And so an executive has to be created, the Caesars, who can actually take action.
Mhm.
And so the form of government, you see a shift of power from legislatures to the executive. And I think that is what's been going on in the United States for quite a long time, that the power shifts to the executive. We saw it with Abraham Lincoln, a tremendous shift of power to the executive, the central executive. We saw it with Franklin Delano Roosevelt,
Yeah.
where they created regulatory agencies that essentially take the law away from Congress. When Congress passes a law today, it's merely an authorization bill for the regulatory agency to define the law according to how it writes the regulations. You see, and then we had George W. Bush announced that he had the executive authority to hold American citizens indefinitely without due process. Then we had Obama, who said he had the right to execute American citizens without due process. We've seen all sorts of executive orders from Biden that you wonder, where is the Congress? Why do they just sit there while their power erodes? And it's because they're so dysfunctional. They can't act. They're so purchased by interest groups that provide their campaign contributions that they can't act in the public's benefit. So I think that what the Trump administration will have to do is just ride roughshod over the opposition. They have to ignore any prerogatives that Congress claims it has, or the judiciary. Just like the Congress uh, let the Biden people weaponize law
Mhm.
against Trump and other politicians, the court rulings do the same thing. The court prosecutions of Trump, this was the use of judiciary as a weapon against political opposition. So when you see this type of total corruption in the institutions, you simply have to run roughshod over them. And it looks like that's Trump's intention. And I think that the people who elected him um, will support that, particularly now that we see, Rashid, so much information coming out about USAID. It was essentially a slush fund for Democrats. It was involved in funding the open borders. It was involved in the impeachment of Trump. So they're using taxpayers' money to interfere in American elections, interfere with the policy. Um, I think that's treason, the USAID. I saw this morning where the Prime Minister of Hungary thanked Trump for exposing him. He said they've been trying to destroy him since he's been in office. So when you have this type of corruption, there's no reason to have any respect for them. You just have to get rid of those kinds. They're like cancers, and you have to get rid of them. We saw, for example, the FBI has now admitted it had 5,000 agents persecuting the January 6th rally attendees. Well, why? I mean, is it the function of the FBI to have 5,000 people hunting down people who went to a rally? You see what I'm saying? These are total corruption. This stuff goes beyond Joseph Stalin's purges. It's just, it's horrific. And they ruin people because they oppose to what they say. So we see the whole 4 years of Biden was an effort where the media is used as a weapon to suppress free speech. So why should anybody pay any attention to CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, or any of these things? The National Public Radio, they're simply paid to lie. So you just run over them. That's all you can do. You just have to run over them. Rome wouldn't have lasted had the Caesars not come and taken power. And many of them were good. Many of them were rotten. But they got some good ones, and the way it was working without them, it was collapsing rapidly because the Senate couldn't act. It couldn't do anything. So, faced with a dysfunctional government, we have to give Trump reins. Now, the result is going to be that the American democracy, or first it was a republic, then a democracy, and now it'll just transform gradually into a Caesarship. But it's been doing this for a long time, and no one's ever tried to stop it. So if Trump doesn't do something, then we're just going to disintegrate.
Well, Mr. Roberts, the Caesarship, do you believe that it could stop the collapse of America, or will it just forestall what eventually will happen with a collapse?
Yeah, and most likely the latter. It'll most likely forestall. But in the case of Rome, it forestalled it for centuries. And I'm not advocating Caesarship. I'm just explaining how it comes about. And it comes about when the institutions that are not dictatorial become so dysfunctional, government can't function. Or in the case of the United States government, it just turned against anyone that wasn't a left liberal Democrat, woke, anti-American, shut down free speech. The government has been used against us. If the USAID and the Department of Health and Human Services are actually financing the immigrant invaders, which we now see they were doing, what sense does this make? So we essentially have an anti-American government, an American institution. And of course, the CIA and FBI, they're totally corrupt. They're just corrupt beyond belief. And how do you reform them? Well, the people recruited over the years to be in these organizations, they're not with us. They're against us. It's like the German cultural Marxists said, we march through the institutions, we capture them one by one, and then we rule. And that's happened to the United States. That's what's happened to us. They've been working at this since the 1930s, and they've achieved it. And now Trump is faced with this. If we continue, we're finished. I mean, just try to imagine surviving another 4 years of the Biden people, where you, it, if Biden got reelected and you and I continue as we do, we would both be in prison
Yeah.
by the end of his second term. Uh, uh, this is the situation. So when it's this serious, uh, it requires serious treatment. And the downside is the serious treatment uh, leaves you with an executive with more power. And so you could get a very bad dictator. Uh, but the alternative is collapse sooner.
There's an old saying, Mr. Roberts, that says power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And
Yeah.
sometimes people have good intentions, but when power is consolidated into the hands of a person, sometimes their intentions change because they have more latitude to do what they want without the ramifications of blowback or the people being able to hold them accountable. When we look at what's going on in America, I often ask this question, and I've been waiting to ask you this for the longest. Um, do you think that even with Trump doing what he's doing, and I do believe that he believe he has some convictions about what he's doing. Um,
Yeah.
do you do you think that this is a little bit too late, especially how as we talked about the aid services of the United States has interfered in elections, color revolutions, assassinations across the globe, and this is built up a lot of they've antagonized the world, and then we look at the debt situation. Do you think that what Trump is doing may be in vain because you can't kick that debt can down the road too much longer?
Well, Rashid, you may be right. This may be the situation, but what's the alternative? To do nothing,
Right.
not to try? I think, you know, you have to make whatever effort you can. It's the responsibility. And I think Trump sees it that way. And if he goes down fighting, if the country goes down fighting, it goes down. But it'll certainly go down if it doesn't fight. You know, you can think about it. Suppose there's a great big bully there, and he's picking on you. And what's your choice? If you don't fight him, you're going to be picked on the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stand up to him right then and there, uh, you might win the fight. But even if you don't, you've taught him you're not taking it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And and I think that one of the things that Trump is doing is he's reconnecting the office of president to the people rather than connecting the office of president to the organized lobby groups that fund the campaigns. So by reconnecting the office to the people, um, he is limiting the office to the will of the people. So it's a new constraint coming in on the executive, one that's been missing from American politics for a long time, and that is the will of the people. And so this constraint is a much better one to be on the president than the Congress or the courts. Because a dictator without any public support basically can't function. And so, in a way, the concern that we're moving from democracy or accountable government to a censorship isn't exactly true, because it looks to me like Trump is reconnecting the office of the president with the will of the people. So that's a constraint, and it's the best constraint to have. But we shouldn't be worried about whether it's too late, because if we do nothing, for sure it's too late.
On this economic, excuse me, on this economic issue, I want to play a short clip for you. And this is Trump and what he says about tariffs, because this has a lot to do with the latest tariffs that's been enacted against China. And I just want you to listen to this real quick, Mr. Roberts.
President-elect Trump is vowing to impose 100% tariffs on BRICS nations unless they commit to not developing a new currency. Trump made the declaration in a Truth Social post Saturday, saying, quote, "There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the U.S. dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America." BRICS is a group comprised of 9 countries with emerging economies. They initially included Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. But earlier this year, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates formally joined the group. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joins us now for more. Kelly, what effects would 100% tariffs on these nations have on consumers?
So look, if they were actually implemented, prices would likely go up, because companies importing goods from China, from Brazil, from those countries, they would have to pay a 100% tax on that. And then what would they do? They would likely pass that on to us. Maybe not the full amount, but likely a lot of that. And so the other thing to think about is we are already hearing, oh, we were thinking about a 10% tariff on China previously. There are already tariffs on China that exist right now. A lot of companies are thinking, well, where can I move my manufacturing? India is a good option. Indonesia, which has applied for membership to the BRICS bloc, is a good option. So now companies would also be thinking, okay, well, I can't do it in China. I can't do it over there. They might move manufacturing here, which would help with jobs, but also increase labor costs. But I said that's if it's implemented, right?
Okay.
This could also be a negotiating tactic.
Why is Trump pushing for this commitment for them to not develop their own currency?
So the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. The vast majority of transactions, when one company from one country and one company from another transact, they happen in the U.S. dollar. Okay. Money is power. And so if you were to have these other countries put together an alternative currency, some of that power could go away. That could be bad, because it would make it.
They're talking about that, and I want to follow that up with just a short snippet about what the geopolitical economic situation is on the dollar. I forget the name of the show. I think it's called the Geopolitical Show or something. But he has something to say about the dollar.
Look, it goes beyond these things. Just today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years, because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
Now, this drive toward DDoS.
So I saw earlier, before the sanctions went into effect, out the blue, they came up with a last minute, quote unquote, last minute deal with Mexico, quote unquote, a last minute deal with Canada, but the sanctions went through for China.
You mean the tariffs?
The tariffs, I'm sorry, the tariffs went through with for China. Why would he push, especially with China holding so much U.S. debt, and China being 95% of all the goods on the store shelves in America come from China? Why would he push for tariffs on China, and especially when the dollar stands at a very precarious state right now, the situation right now?
Well, Rashid, it seems obvious that Trump never intended any tariffs. This was a negotiating tool, and he used it to get both Mexico and Canada to agree to defend our borders from their end. So both Canada and Mexico have agreed to spend over $1 billion and deploy 10,000 troops or border guards to prevent entry into the United States of drugs like fentanyl and illegal immigrants. So for Trump, he never intended the tariffs. This was a threat that he gave to the two countries that border us. And he said, okay, now you cooperate in helping us defend our borders, or else we'll do this. So, and I think the same thing with China. He hasn't any real intention of putting any tariffs on China. It's something he wants China to do, that he's using this as leverage. Most likely, it has something to do with some sort of illegal transfer of American technology. What is this new firm or technology, Nvidia or something like that? It seems to, it's not supposed to go in, but it is. And so he's probably trying to get the Chinese to enforce on their end the prohibition of this technology transfer. That's probably what he's up to, and maybe the 10% tariff isn't high enough to convince the Chinese. So I don't know where that negotiation will go or end up. But I think the tariffs were just negotiating. It's a way to open the deal, to make the deal. And the tariffs themselves are, you see, the reason we have trade deficits, particularly with China, is that the American corporations basically pushed or forced by Wall Street relocated their production for American markets to China to get the labor cost savings, because the labor cost savings pushed up the corporate profits, which pleased Wall Street. And since the profits went up, the performance bonuses of the American corporate executives went up. You see, the bonuses of these companies, the main pay that an executive gets today is not his salary, it's the performance bonuses. They're many times larger than the salary, because the salary was limited years ago by Congress. If it exceeds $1 million a year, it's not tax deductible. So unless it's performance related, well, performance related means higher profits. So how you get higher profits? Well, when they started this offshoring, the wage in the United States, now this is not even including fringe benefits like pensions and health care, was $25 an hour. In China, it was 25 cents an hour. So if you relocated your production to China, you could see the enormous increase in profits and bonuses. And so this is the origin of the offshoring, and that's the reason we have the trade deficit with China, because when the goods that Apple computer, Nike shoes, Levi jeans, all the things that are made there, when they come back in the United States, they come in as imports. So it's not Chinese corporations that are responsible for our trade deficit. It's our own corporations who move their production that they sell to Americans to China. So this is why we have the trade deficit. It's the fault of the American corporations who move their production offshore. And so to blame China is nonsensical.
Well, why do
And
you think, Mr. Roberts, why do you think that they continue to trumpet it's China's fault to the people and that the Chinese are taking advantage of us and all of this stuff? Why do they continue to trumpet that knowing what you just said?
well, they may not know that. It's amazing how little the leading players in America know. They have certain patterns of behavior that work. And denouncing a foreigner is much more acceptable than denouncing your own corporations, or Wall Street. When you start denouncing Wall Street and your corporations, there go your political campaign contributions. So you denounce the foreign country. Plus, on the surface, to an ordinary American, it looks like it's China because they don't understand anything about economics or offshoring or how products that come in from American firms abroad are worsening the imports and the trade deficit. This stuff is over their head. In fact, it's over the head of most economists, as far as I can tell. So that's, I think, Rashid, why it happens. We just aren't well enough educated, and we don't pay attention close enough. And of course, we haven't had a media for the entirety of the 21st century. We haven't had a media since Clinton allowed 6 mega corporations to buy 90% of the media. And that was in 1998, 1999. Now, this was a concentration of the media from thousands of separate media organizations, local and national and all the rest. And 90% of it went into 6 mega corporations. Well, they lost all independence. Now, you might say the media really wasn't any good before that. And it's true. It was very biased. It's had a liberal bias for as long as I've been alive. But still, there were so many different organizations, you could get different points of view. And there was some competition between them in reporting. And so they, prior to Trump allowing the concentration of the media, they didn't everyone sound exactly the same. You could get different interpretations from different media sources. Well, all that's been gone. I mean, we might as well just have one media organization because they all speak with the same voice. So if you have no way to be informed and you're not educated in the subject, and so it's easy to blame foreigner. We blame Russia, we blame China, we blame Iran, we blame Muslims. All Muslims are terrorists. This, but this is just. You could say it's a very lazy way of thinking, but it's really just the fact that people aren't educated. They're not interested. They'd rather watch a sports event or a football game or they it's too much. It takes too much effort to be informed. You know how much effort it takes to be informed, to have any idea what's going on. It's hard. And it takes a commitment. And if you don't have it, then they can tell you anything. You got no way of knowing.
Mhm. And on that point, Mr. Roberts, I often say this on my platform. While we look at all of the things that are going on in society, the destruction of morals, ethics, and values and stuff all across America, I think everybody misses the most important aspect of the collapse of America: the dumbing down of America's education and the defunding of proper education, because people don't realize that it is proper education that guides you and civilizes you. If
Yeah.
you don't have proper education, you can have education, any kind, but if you don't have the proper education, you are saddling the future scientists, lawyers, doctors, engineers, astronauts. You're saddling them with a disadvantage as they graduate school. And when you can um, give a teacher 30 or $40,000 and give a basketball player $40 million to dribble a ball and shoot it, that shows you where your priority lies. And and to me, that is like putting a nuclear bomb at the base of your society, because it is education, proper education, which enlightens us and sets the stage for a progressive, enlightened society. What do you say about that, Mr.?
Well, I agree with you. Um, uh, if you don't have proper education, you have propaganda. And the universities have just turned into propaganda organizations. It's like, I mentioned earlier, the German cultural Marxists came to the United States in the 1930s, and their program was you march through the institutions and you capture them one by one, and then you have the country. And that's the way to have a revolution, not to go into the streets and the barricades. You'll lose. But if you corrupt the institutions of society one by one, and of course, you start with the schools, with education. And that's what they've done. If you can't hardly find a department in any university that doesn't have cultural Marxist views. And that is that the United States is evil, has to be overthrown. And we see that very prominently displayed in the Biden administration. And so if the people doing the teaching are alienated from the society, then they're going to be producing students who are alienated. And that's what's happened. This is why we have constitutional lawyers, we have prosecutors, and they don't respect the United States Constitution, because the Constitution, they've learned, is a racist document. It's used for oppression. It's white privilege. So if the legal profession, including the bar associations, don't respect the Constitution, you're not going to have any rights. And so it's the success of this cultural Marxist movement. And of course, the movement has lasted longer than its creators. And of course, today it's huge in the universities. It's dominant. You can't hardly think of a department that doesn't reflect the attitude that there's something fundamentally wrong with Western civilization and it needs to be destroyed. And they're busy at work trying to destroy it. And that's why everything is dysfunctional. That's why if you go to a rally for Trump, they arrest you as an insurrectionist. So, and it's why they can blatantly steal an election and nobody says anything about it. So that's basically the problem. It's such it's been so successful for the cultural Marxists, they've hollowed out everything. How are you going to get a proper education? You see, you can't even teach English literature anymore because all the authors are racist or they're anti-Semite, like Shakespeare. They can't teach Shakespeare, so you can't even learn the power of the English language. because he says something every now and then about a Jew. There wasn't any such thing as anti-Semitism in Shakespeare's time. We're talking about the 1500s. So when you have that, what is there to teach? When they teach Western civilization, they teach it's wrong, it's evil. And so here you are living in it, and it's being dismantled by the education system. And so what basically has happened, Rashid, is there's been a destruction of belief in the principles on which our civilization is based. We've destroyed through propaganda the belief of people in the system. Now, it hasn't been complete, as we see with the MAGA Americans. But most of these people are not the ones with prestigious college degrees, master's degrees, PhDs. They're not in the intellectual class. These are the working class people, the ordinary kinds of people who are not intellectual and have not gone through Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Columbia and the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford and MIT and all of that. They've been immune to it. And so we've got two kinds of people now, the educated ones, which are basically anti-American, and the remnants of the working class that the Democrats formerly represented, but no longer represent. So where's the working class? They're for Trump, not for Democrats. So you can see that the Democrats are no longer the party of the working class. In fact, what do the Democrats call the working class? Trump deplorables. So you can see how far the corruption has gone, that the Democrat Party, which was always the party of the working class, is now against the working class and denounces them, they're Trump deplorables. And what is the Democratic Party? It's a bunch of woke intellectuals, people who want a Tower of Babel, a Sodom and Gomorrah, people who are out trying to legalize every form of sexual perversity. So that's a serious problem, and it really, like you said earlier when you asked me, is it too late for Trump to do anything? It's very late. We've lost the universities. We've lost the school boards. If you're a parent and they're teaching your kid that he's born in the wrong body, and you go complain, they drag you out of the school board. So it's a very sad and dangerous situation. And Trump has to be an extremely brave person to take this on. This is a horrendous task, extremely dangerous to him. I mean, look, his first term, all they did was try to impeach him, to arrest him. He's a Russian agent. All of that completely destroyed his first term. And then for the next 4 years, they criminalize all these charges and bring indictments. They're trying to put him in prison. Well, he's had 8 years of the most atrocious behavior by the system. So he can't have any confidence in it. And he realizes it's totally corrupt and anti-American, and he's willing to take this on. Well, he knows he's at risk every hour of being assassinated. the deep state can assassinate him. It's not even clear he's safe with the Secret Service. So I say we ought to get off his back and let him see if he can clean house. If he can't clean house, we're finished. That's all there is to it. We're finished. I've lost your sound.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You disappeared. The sound disappeared.
Sometimes the program on StreamYard does that, and then I have to refresh the system sometimes. But I offer to everybody these words that my teacher gave to me concerning America. He says that the destruction of America's educational system means the destruction of America. The wise of the wise should take note of that, because when you start defunding and destroying the educational system, you destroy the way that people are civilized and they become savages. And all one has to do to see if he told the truth is look at America now, and we see savagery everywhere. So um, but
Yeah.
but but I want to pivot to something as you were talking. You said something very important, and as you said that, I got an alert on this screen right here from the Economics Collapse blog. And they have an article up here. Let me see. Pull it. This article is titled, "Are they positioning themselves for a predetermined scenario in which there will be a massive stock market crash?" And it says, "Do they know something that we do not know? All of a sudden, hedge funds are betting billions of dollars that the stock market is going to crash. If they're wrong, they will lose a ton of money. But if they are correct, they will make absolutely enormous profits. So why are they feeling so confident that a stock market collapse is in our future? Without a doubt, the real economy has been moving in the wrong direction for quite some time. But for years, there have been relentless efforts to keep the financial markets propped up. Could it be possible that there is a scenario in which the financial markets will simply be allowed to fail at some point?" And then it goes and I want your opinion on that, Mr. Roberts.
Well, that would be one way for the ruling establishment to disrupt Trump's agenda, because yeah, they can crash the Federal Reserve can crash the market whenever it wants. And so if the market crashes, then everything Trump's focused on gets to the back burner, because we now have crisis and everybody will blame Trump. They always blame the president. They don't ever blame the Federal Reserve. They always blame the president because most Americans think, well, the president's the ruler and he has all the power. And so whatever happens, it'll come down on Trump's head. And it's one way for the establishment to stop his attack on them. And so I would say there is a risk that the establishment will collapse the stock market in hopes of creating panic and unemployment and all kinds of other things that will take all of Trump's attention away from everything else he's trying to do. This is certainly, it's sort of a last resort for them. I think they would almost prefer to assassinate him rather than to take this step, because it can hurt them too. Of course, hedge funds, if they know it's going to happen and they sell everything short, will make a lot of money. If they sell everything short, the market goes up, they're going to lose everything. So the hedge funds would have to have some sort of inside information. But look, institutions like BlackRock, I mean, if anybody knows anything that's going to happen economically, they know. and the big banks that the Federal Reserve protects, they would know. So I think on the whole, yes, something like this could happen. Now, it doesn't mean that it would crash if the Fed wasn't propping it up. But they can certainly crash it. And, there are a few bad pronouncements from Powell, the Federal Reserve chairman. Um, uh, they could say, "Oh, inflation's back, and we got to raise interest rates." And when you start raising interest rates, you start unwinding all kinds of deals that were made because they don't work anymore because the interest rate's gone up, and so you cause a, a ripple effect of problems, and it's something they can easily do. I don't think since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, I don't think we've ever had an inflation or a recession that the Federal Reserve didn't cause. Whether they did it intentionally or whether they did it from their own incompetence, I think it varied by the instance. So the power that they created when they created the Federal Reserve System in 1913 was probably the most dangerous power that has been created. And it can be destructive just from incompetence, which it appears the Great Depression was. The Fed caused the Great Depression, but it seems it was just incompetence. But they've done other things that I think were intentional. For example, if you look how concentrated the banking system is today, where 5 top banks have 90% of all deposits, you see, how did they do this? Well, every time the Fed causes a recession, all the regional banks get in trouble. Well, the Fed doesn't save them, it only saves the big banks. So it lets the regional banks go, which means the big banks buy them. So the big banks get bigger and bigger. And even we've had mergers with the two biggest banks, JP Morgan and Chase Manhattan. They're now one bank. Well, we've seen other Federal Reserve actions that, in my opinion, they basically destroyed the family farms in order to create agribusiness, commercial corporations running agriculture. The farmers would get in debt, and the Fed would cause a recession, and poof, they can't pay their loans, and the agribusiness buys them up. So I think the Fed has helped to create monopoly, and that transfers more and more income and wealth into fewer and fewer hands. And so I don't see it as a successful organization, um, and very suspicious of its creation.
I would think that the power that the Fed has should be entrusted into the Treasury Department because the Constitution says that you know Congress has the right to mint money or whatever. Not the Fed. And why isn't anyone calling that out? That the Fed has the power that is supposed to be in the body of government, but it is outside of the body of government and has little to no accountability to anyone.
Well, because that's why the big banks had it created. The whole function of the Fed was to be in a position to bail out the big banks from their mistakes. So the big banks wanted to take risk that could pay off bigger than ordinary business, but they didn't want the risk going wrong and hurting them. So they said, we'll create the Fed, and the Fed's purpose is to prevent our failure. And, there've been books written about this, explaining it. And that's how that's how we got it. Historically, the American population was opposed to a central bank, a national bank, it was called in those days, uh, because they saw that a group of people would have power um, over local businesses. They could ruin you. They could benefit their friends. The farmers were always suspicious of a national bank. And when we were largely an agricultural society, they couldn't get a national bank. Well, they had one, and I think it was Andrew Jackson abolished it. I may have that backwards, but I think we did have one, and it was abolished. And then there was terrific opposition to having another one. So they they created the Fed by not presenting it as a national bank. And this is, we have all those Federal Reserve banks that spread across the country,
Mm-hmm.
and the notion was that they would be closer to local banks that got in trouble and needed some cash to pay off depositors, so there wouldn't be a run on the bank. And so they presented this as a way of preventing bank failure. But of course, it's caused bank failure and the concentration of the banking system. Um, so you again, to know anything about it, you got to first of all have an understanding of economics and banking and all of that, and then after you have that kind of a understanding, then you got to look into the history of the opposition to a national bank and the people who wanted it and what was going on, and then you have to see how it got created. And how is an ordinary American going to do that? They can't. But before the creation of the Federal Reserve, this was the operation of the Treasury. It was a Treasury operation. And you're correct, that's where it belongs. And that's where it was until 1913. And they simply took the power away and gave it to the big banks. And that's basically what the Federal Reserve serves. The operating arm of the Federal Reserve System is the New York Federal Reserve Bank. And who are its directors? The executives of the big banks. So there you have the story, Rashid.
So it's corrupt. The system, not only the political system, but the financial system, and we see the judicial system now is corrupt from head to toe. And when you
And
have a system like that, Mr. Roberts, should you have to change it from the root, because if you allow the root, if you cut off the grass and allow the root to stay, it'll just flourish again, right?
that's right. And that's what Trump's doing. He's cutting off the root. He's going to, the report is he wants to abolish the education department. Well, it needs to be abolished because it's been instrumental in turning education into anti-American propaganda. He's abolishing USAID, and it's been instrumental in destroying everything that we stand for. A slush fund, too, for overthrowing governments, a slush fund for blocking MAGA candidates like Carrie Lake in Arizona. He's abolished it. He's trying to get the names of the FBI officials who instigated the persecutions or the prosecutions, however you want to call it, of the January 6th protesters. They want the names of the officials who tried to prosecute Trump as a Russian agent. They realize that the FBI is totally corrupt. The CIA is totally corrupt. They know that. They're trying to clear those people out. So he is going after the root. You know, he's already got 20,000 of the senior civil service to accept buyouts and resign. He wants 200,000 of them out because they're highly biased. They're entirely Democrats, and they're associated with everything that's gone wrong. And they block all efforts to get the agencies of government serving the people rather than overthrowing the government or overthrowing the institutions and polluting them. So that's what he's doing. He's going after the root. And if he's blocked, then we'll know nothing can be done. We're going to get a test. You know, we're having it right now. There's a test. If Trump can clear this out from the roots, we have a chance. If he's blocked, we're finished. There's no sense pretending any different. And so, as you made the point earlier, this is an existential threat to the ruling establishment. So what do? If they can't somehow block him, they can cause an economic collapse. They can go back to assassination again. This fight has hardly begun, but we see that Trump jumped in with both feet. And now some people say, well, it's just an act. He's just really one of them. And he's doing this to show that we can't do anything. So we might as well accept their rule of the establishment. There are some people who say that. Some of these people are probably secure. Others are probably it's probably some of it coming from the ruling establishment in order to discourage Trump supporters and convince them that he's really just acting in order to prove that nothing can be done. So everybody has to shut up and accept the ruling class. So who's to know? But we're going to find out, you know. And it probably isn't going to take 4 years. I would say at the end of 2 years, we'll know whether anything can be done or not. And it really depends. You see, I think the ruling establishment decided to let Trump in because they came to the conclusion they could block him in the courts. And so the question is he prepared to run over the courts? And it's something easy for an executive to do because the courts haven't got any police. They've got no military. Even Franklin Delano Roosevelt back in the 30s threatened the Supreme Court. Said, you get out of my way, or I'm going to appoint a huge number of new judges. So, if the institutions that comprise a democracy are unreliable, then they are the threat to democracy. And so, but they'll blame Trump. But Trump is faced with a dysfunctional situation. And so as we said before, he's got to take it on and run over it, or there's no hope. And all the evidence shows that the civil service gives about of all the political contributions of the civil service, 95% go to Democrats. So it's a totally unbalanced thing. It's a Democrat institution. The civil service is a political institution of the Democratic Party. It is not an objective part of a honest government. So what can you do? If you leave them there, they're going to block everything you try to do. So we'll see. I mean, we'll know. It won't be long.
What last question, Mr. Roberts?
Yeah.
If he fires and forced all of these people into, I mean, out of office or out of their positions, do you think that they would be so mad that they would start a parallel government to take on his government and to undermine his credibility and his government at the same time, which could clash heads?
Well, it would depend. I mean, if the military deserted Trump, they might get away with that. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
Hmm.
It really depends. You see, but they had the military pretty corrupt. But he seems to have already put a halt to that. So I think it's just more likely they'll collapse the economy, blame him. I don't know what he's going to do about the prostitute media, CNN and the New York Times and ABC and AP and Reuters, all that. What are they going to do about that? Maybe they've just lost so much credibility, it no longer matters what they say. And I think programs like yours, there's so many of them, I think they're just taking over the news and taking over the explanations. So it may not matter. But I think what he should do is break up those 6 mega corporations because they're in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And they're in violation of the American tradition of having a dispersed and independent media. So the thousands of media organizations that were concentrated in 6 mega companies, that should be broken up. That would be one way. And then you could start getting independent journalism or some independent journalism out of the prostitute media. So I wish he would do that. I'd like to see a Justice Department antitrust case against the 6 mega corporations that hold the media. This would be in the interest of journalists because now they could actually do their job. They wouldn't have to tell lies in order to have a paycheck. But that's what has, you see, people don't really understand this media they despise. They're forced into lying or they ain't got any job. Well, that's awful. That's an awful position to be in because how can you look yourself in the face, in the mirror? How can you, it's awful. So Trump could rescue these journalists by breaking up these mega corporations. And I think too, a lot of people miss newspapers. They were handy. You didn't have to carry around a device that connected to the internet. You might still use the internet, but it was much easier to have newspapers.
Well, Mr. Roberts, thank you so much for your time. I mean, I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to say in closing before we bring this
Well, you
chapter to
did
an
just,
end today?
yeah, I'm going to encourage you to keep it up, keep going, keep going,
Thank you, sir.
keep pushing, keep it up. We need voices. The more voices, the better. Keep it up, and you have a good show, and keep it up.
Thank you
Thank you
so much.
for it.
Thank you for joining me, Mr. Roberts. I really appreciate it. And I'll be checking in on you from time to time, Mr. Roberts.
I look forward to that, Rashid.
All right, stay
All
blessed
right.
and stay safe.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye for
right.
now.
All right, goodbye. Everybody, as I often say, um, do right by others, not because there's some material gain or because there may be some um, uh, accolades for doing it. Do right by others because it's the right thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching, God is always watching. And as I often say, if you love truth, know that I love you, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out of here. Thank you so much.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a